The dusty dawn settled over Red River's edge like a deliberate hush, the kind that scratched at a woman's nerves until she felt the wind whisper warnings through the tumbleweeds. At the edge of town, where the scrub began to thin and the horizon cracked open to endless plains, Marisol Vega stood barefoot on the sun-baked earth, her chest heaving. The town council's decree hung heavy in her mind. She was banished for speaking truths no man dared voice. A week earlier, Marisol had challenged Mayor Hartwell's decree taxing the farmers beyond subsistence. She had questioned both his authority and the complacency of Red River's Edge's citizens. The men called her trouble. The women whispered she'd brought ruin upon them. Even the preacher called her prideful, though her eyes had found compassion behind his austere gaze. In their judgment, her independence threatened the fragile order. She tightened her shawl against the crisp morning air, the rough wool biting against her shoulders. Her dark hair whipped across her face, and she brushed it back to reveal eyes that seemed too fierce, too alive for a woman made to be quiet. Those eyes' embers of defiance had cost her everything, home, family, and the few possessions she carried in a battered leather satchel. But Marisol was not one to surrender. She had been raised by her abuela on tales of ancestors whose spirits rode the storm clouds, who danced beneath the desert moon and vowed that no cage would ever hold their souls. Those stories had taught Marisol two things: that freedom was sacred and that the world belonged equally to every living heart. She took a step onto the road, its dusty path stretching toward unknown horizons. Behind her, the unsympathetic gates of Red River's Edge clanged shut, sealing her fate. Ahead lay nothing but open sky and questions she dared to answer. What awaited her beyond the town's limits was uncertain wild rattlesnakes, bloodthirsty coyotes, ghosts of long-forgotten outlaws. Yet as the sun rose, burning away the last wisps of night, Marisol felt a stir of exhilaration. Each breath tasted of possibility. Each heartbeat called her forward. She had nothing left to lose and everything to prove to herself. A sudden rustle in the sagebrush made her draw a trembling breath, hand hovering near the wooden handle of the small knife tucked in her belt. The wind carried a faint whistle as if a nomad's flute mourning a lost lover. Marisol's pulse quickened. She scanned the horizon. Then she saw him, a lone rider, silhouette outlined by the morning glow, moving toward her like a phantom drawn from legend. His horse's hooves kicked up spirals of dust. He wore a leather duster, its fringe dancing in the wind. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, but even at a distance she could feel the wild in him, the unbroken spirit that mirrored her own. She took a cautious step backward, uncertainty warring with curiosity. Who was this stranger, riding through danger unbidden, drawn to a woman cast out by her own people? Just as the rider closed the distance, Marisol's heart thundered. This moment, fraught with dread and possibility, would define everything that followed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The horse came to a halt a few paces away, its rider sitting tall and unmoving. Dust swirled around his boots, and for a long moment, nothing stirred but the desert wind and the whisper of crows overhead. Miso tightened her grip on the strap of her satchel, her voice steady. You've ridden a long way to reach a woman no one wants. The rider dismounted slowly, like a man accustomed to both violence and stillness. His movements were practiced, deliberate. He pulled off his hat and revealed a face weathered by sun and years of wandering. His eyes, the color of stormlit sage, met hers without flinching. I'm not here on behalf of anyone, he said, his voice deep and edged with weariness. Saw the smoke behind you and figured someone might need help. Marisol's gaze flicked over his shoulder, where the low plume of smoke from Red River's Edge marked the town like a scar. She said nothing. He glanced down at her bare feet. You heading anywhere in particular? She shook her head, the motion small but resolute. Just forward. A quiet passed between them, heavy but not hostile. The stranger shifted his weight. Name's Egan Reyes. Been writing since Montana lost its teeth. You? Marisol Vega. I was born in a town that doesn't want me. He chuckled dryly, adjusting the saddle on his mare. That makes two of us. They walked side by side, in silence until the sun climbed higher. Egan didn't ask why she was exiled, and she didn't offer the tale. He seemed the kind of man who understood wounds better when left unspoken. By mid-morning, they came upon the remnants of a long-abandoned trading post, its timbers splintered and sun-bleached. A creaking sign hung by one rusted nail, rocking back and forth. Marisol scanned the horizon. No other souls in sight. Egan dismounted and began to tie his horse near a collapsed water trough. This place had a name once, he muttered. Before. They bled it dry. Marisol stepped inside what remained of the post. Crates lay broken across the floor, dust so thick it muffled her footsteps. Her eyes found a tin can with faded lettering and a torn curtain hanging from what had once been a window. Despite the ruin, it felt like sanctuary. She sat on a crate, brushing her hand across her forehead. How far to the next town? 3 days if we ride steady, Egan replied. That is, if you're planning to keep riding. Marisol looked at him, her brow furrowed. Why would you help me? Egan didn't hesitate. Because I remember what it's like to be discarded. And I never did take kindly to fences built by cowards. They shared a simple meal, hardtack and dried beef from Egan's saddlebags. He passed her a canteen, and as she drank, the cool water felt like absolution. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. You always travel alone? She asked. He nodded. Safer that way. Fewer ghosts to answer to. Marisol traced the rim of the tin cup. And now? I'm starting to think some ghosts are worth riding beside. She smiled then, faint but real. It surprised even her. Night fell fast. They made camp beneath the broken awning of the trading post. Coyotes howled in the distance, and the stars cracked open the sky. Marisol lay staring upward, her head resting on her satchel. Egan only a few feet away tending the fire. She turned toward him. What did they take from you? Egan's face darkened with memory. I had a brother. He thought he could fix the world. Got gunned down for it. I'm sorry. He knew what he was doing. Just like you. Marisol felt the weight of those words wrap around her like a second blanket. She closed her eyes, unsure if the ache in her chest was sorrow, gratitude, or something beginning to bloom. Before sleep took her, she whispered, If I keep moving, will the past lose its grip? Egan's voice was low but certain. Only if you ride fast enough and stop looking back. In the darkness she made a vow. She would not look back. What she didn't know, what neither of them could know, was that by sunrise, the path forward would split and one wrong turn would cost them everything. Subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's chapter. Where we're going next ain't marked on any map. The morning came cruel and early. Pale orange light painted the ruins of the trading post, casting long shadows that dripped like spilled ink across the sand. Marisol awoke to the call of a lone raven perched atop a broken beam. It stared down at her like it knew things it wouldn't say aloud. Egan was already on his feet, rolling up his blanket and stirring the embers of the fire with the heel of his boot. His rifle lay beside him, glinting in the first rays of sun. Isol rose slowly, her back aching from the hard ground. Her first steps were stiff, but determination pulled her forward. She ran a hand through her tangled hair and glanced at Egan, who seemed to be studying the horizon. He nodded toward the north. You hear that? She paused, holding her breath. In the silence, something low rumbled hooves. Not one horse. Several riders, she asked. 6, maybe more. He picked up his rifle and checked the chamber. We've got 10 minutes, maybe less. Don't suppose you've made enemies worth killing for. Only the ones that like power, she replied, gripping her satchel tight. Egan turned to her, his tone sharp but calm. Then we move, now. They mounted and rode hard, leaving the trading post behind in a cloud of dust. The rising sun cast long golden stripes across the plains, but Marisol's thoughts darkened with every hoofbeat. Whoever was behind them wasn't a merchant caravan. They rode with speed, purpose, and deadly silence. Out by midday, the terrain had shifted. The tall grass gave way to red sandstone ridges that clawed at the sky like ancient bones. Egan led them through a narrow pass where shadows clung like secrets, then veered west toward a gulch hidden beneath a crooked rock outcrop. They dismounted and slipped down into the gulch, horses tethered just out of view. Egan crouched behind a boulder, rifle in hand. Marisol knelt beside him. "You shoot?" he asked. "I can cut a chicken's throat mid-flight," she replied. He glanced at her sidelong, not sure if she was joking. "Good enough." The hoofbeats grew louder, then paused. Marisol held her breath. A voice rang out, male, cocky, unmistakably southern. "Egan Reyes, you owe us a reckoning." Egan swore under his breath. That voice, Levi Cross. Who? Bounty hunter and snake. He used to ride with me. Used to? Until I caught him selling children to silver barons. A pause. "Why is he after you now?" "Because I burned his ledger and shot off his thumb." Marisol blinked. "That'll do it." The riders fanned out across the ridge above, their shadows looming long across the sand. Egan scanned them, counting silently. 8, all armed. All waiting. Levi's voice again. "I'll give you 10 minutes to come out, Reyes, or I start skinning the rocks." Egan turned to Marisol. "You still feel like heading forward?" She met his eyes. "I didn't come this far to cower." He smiled, just a sliver. "Then we hold the line." The next moments passed in silence, thick and choking. Marisol tightened the belt around her waist, fingers brushing the hilt of her knife. She closed her eyes, remembering her abuela's voice. "In the heart of fire, become the flame." Egan moved like a man who'd done this before. He adjusted his position, set the sights of his rifle on the narrowest entry to the gulch, and steadied his breath. Then all hell broke loose. The first shot cracked through the canyon like thunder. Dust flew, rocks shattered. Then a scream, Egan's. Bullet had found its mark. "Move." He barked. Marisol darted toward the ledge, crouching low. She counted the shadows 7 now. They were circling fast, trying to flank. She hurled a rock as a distraction, then lunged up, knife flashing. One rider got too close. She slashed at his thigh, sending him howling off his mount. Another raised his revolver, but Egan dropped him clean with a single shot. Then Levi's voice rang again, angrier now. "You shouldn't have brought her, Reyes. Blood's on her hands now. Better blood than chains." Marisol shouted back. The echo swallowed her words. Then came the silence again. But this one was different, heavier. A silence filled with planning. "They'll wait till dusk," Egan murmured. "Try to smoke us out. What do we do?" He looked at her, face streaked with dust and sweat. "We get unpredictable." As the sun dipped lower, painting the rocks crimson, they began to prepare, rigging traps with horsetack and thorn brush, collecting loose stones to roll down the cliffside, mapping escape routes by starlight. When night fell, the gulch became a battlefield of whispers, and wind. Marisol moved like a ghost, striking then vanishing. Egan fired only when he knew he wouldn't miss. One by one, the riders faltered. A scream here, a body there. Until only Levi remained. Then came the final face-off. Egan and Levi met under the stars, guns drawn, no words, just breath. Just grit. Marisol, watching from behind a boulder, gripped her knife, but didn't interfere. A shot rang out. Only one. Levi fell. Egan stood for a long moment, then holstered his weapon. "You all right?" He asked into the night. I am now, Marisol answered. They left the gulch behind as dawn rose again. No more shadows chasing them. No more voices demanding reckoning. Just two souls riding forward. Toward a future unwritten. Subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's journey. Something's coming, and it doesn't wear a badge. By the time the fourth dawn broke, they had crossed the gulch and reached the scrub plains, where the desert gave way to a strange and unsettling quiet. It was a silence not of peace, but of watching. The air felt heavier, like the land was waiting for something to fall. Egan rode with his head slightly turned, ears sharp to every windbreak, every shift in the earth. Marisol trailed him closely, her knife strapped tighter than before, eyes flicking between distant hills. They hadn't spoken much since the shootout. It wasn't tension, it was reflection. Killing a man leaves an echo in your bones. Midday found them beneath a twisted cottonwood, its leaves brittle and whispering secrets to the wind. Egan dismounted and pulled a worn scrap of map from his duster. He knelt, using a stick to trace out the land. There's a place about 20 miles west, he said. Used to be an old cavalry fort, abandoned after the war ended. If we're lucky, it still has a roof. If we're not lucky? Marisol asked, wiping dust from her forehead. Then we sleep under the stars and pray the coyotes stay philosophical. She smirked, but didn't laugh. Her gaze drifted to the horizon. Why go there? Egan hesitated. Then he said, because someone's waiting for me. Marisol turned toward him. A woman? He didn't answer right away. His fingers traced a name on the map. Her name's Lark. She's not mine. She's my brother's girl, was. Marisol saw the weight he carried, though he spoke without drama. Just truth, stripped bare. She sent word through a trader last month. Said someone's been asking about me, not friendly types. And, you think they'll go after her? Egan nodded. She's stubborn, like he was. Won't run. That kind of fire draws lightning. Marisol took a slow breath. Then we ride faster. By sundown, the air turned metallic. The sky bruised to a deep violet, and the horses grew restless. That night, lightning laced the distance like warning shots from the heavens. They made camp in a gully surrounded by mesquite and dry reeds. Egan built a fire low to the ground, flame shielded from the wind. Marisol set a perimeter of crushed prickly pear. Her abuela had taught her it repelled most desert creatures. As the storm loomed, the silence between them gave way to stories. Did you ever love someone? She asked, her voice soft, near the firelight. Egan didn't look at her. Once, long ago. She died in childbirth. I'm sorry, I was 2. Until I met Lark. She reminded me that mourning someone doesn't mean you stop living. Marisol tossed another twig into the fire. Sparks rose like tiny prayers. And you? He asked. Was there someone? She stared into the flames. I thought there was. He wanted a wife who obeyed. I wanted to build a school. Egan smiled. Without joy. Didn't work out, I take it. He told the council I was unstable. Said I read too many books and stirred up the womenfolk. Then he married my cousin. Egan let out a low whistle. Ought to be a law against that. There was. But he knew how to bend it. They sat in silence again, but now it was companionable. The kind that grows from shared wounds. Then dash movement. Mariso froze. Egan's hand was already on his rifle. The horses snorted, ears pinned. A low whistle cut through the darkness. Egan's eyes narrowed. That's not wind. They stood slowly, scanning the gully. A shadow broke from the dark, stumbling forward. It was a man barely. Torn clothes, one eye swollen shut, dried blood across his shirt. Help, he croaked. Before collapsing at their feet. Maris. Will dropped beside him, checking his pulse. He's alive, barely. Egan knelt too, inspecting the man's belt. Carved insignia, Fort Leclerc. He came from where we're going. They dragged the man closer to the fire, stripped his outer shirt, and found a knife wound below his. Ribs clean, deliberate. He was left to die, Marisol whispered. The man stirred, eyes fluttering open. They took her. Who? The girl, red scarf. Kept saying she had a name worth gold. Egan's blood went cold. Lark. The man coughed, blood staining his lips, said ... They'd send her to the buyer. Down south. Saad Reyes would come ... and die. His breath rattled, then stopped. Mar Iazol covered his face. Egan stood. His jaw clenched. This wasn't about money. This was a message. She rose beside him. Then we deliver our own. In the distance, the storm broke at last, lightning cracking the sky in two. They wrote at dawn. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Tomorrow, a fortress of secrets. And a rescue that may cost them everything. The fifth morning came without birdsong. Even the wind was reluctant, slinking low between the rocks as if it didn't dare disturb what was coming. Egan and Marisol rode hard through dawn, the sky behind them stained red with the remnants of the storm. Every hoofbeat seemed to echo a little too long, like the land itself was listening. They didn't speak much, each locked in thought, anticipating what waited at Fort Leclerc. By midday, the ruins of the outpost came into view. It wasn't what Marisol expected. The old fort sat hunched between two hills, its stone walls cracked and scorched. The wooden towers had partially collapsed, their watch platforms dangling like broken limbs. A buzzard circled overhead, wings cutting the sky in silent loops. From a distance, it looked deserted. But Egan knew better. He pulled up his mare behind a ridge and motioned Marisol to dismount. We go the rest on foot. She slid off her horse, checking the laces on her boots and adjusting the knife at her side. You think Lark's inside? Egan's face was stone. They wouldn't leave a message like that unless they knew I'd come. They approached the fort from the west, using the dry creek bed for cover. Thorns scratched at their clothes, and sun baked the back of Marisol's neck, but neither complained. Every step brought them closer to something both dreaded and necessary. At the edge of the fort's crumbling wall, they paused. Egan scanned the perimeter, then pointed toward a breach near the southeast corner, a pile of fallen stone, just high enough to slip through. They waited for a break in the wind, then darted forward. Inside, the fort was worse. The courtyard was strewn with debris, rusted tools, torn canvas, shattered crates. Burned timbers crossed the parade grounds like fallen bones. The air smelled of ash, oil, and something older. Deeper, they crept through the shadows of the old barracks, ears straining. Then a voice, faint, female. Let go of me. Marisol's eyes widened. Egan didn't hesitate. He moved with the grace of a hunter, steps silent, breath measured. Marisol followed close. Crouching behind the remnants of a wall, they reached a narrow hallway leading to the old command quarters. Inside, torches flickered. The voice came again, clearer now. You have no right. Then a laugh, low, slithering. Male. Egan's jaw tightened. That's Virgil Kane, Marisol frowned. Who is he? Used to run freight between Texas and New Mexico. Then he started running people. Rich men pay well for exotic company. Marisol's stomach turned. They peeked around the corner. Lark stood chained to a post, arms above her head, dress torn at the shoulder. Her face was defiant, chin high despite the bruises. 3 men stood near her. One polished a revolver. One lounged against the wall, chewing something dark and spitting. The last, tall, sharp-featured, with a pale scar running from ear to chin, watched her like she was already sold. Virgil Kane. Egan's breath hitched. Marisol laid a hand on his arm. If we rush in, they'll kill her before we reach her. He nodded. We need a distraction. Marisol whispered, You ever fired powder kegs? Egan grinned. Only when I wanted to be remembered. They slipped away, circling back to the supply shed. Inside, they found old barrels, 2 still marked. with faint black X's. Black powder, Egan confirmed. Marisol fashioned a fuse from torn cloth soaked in lantern oil. One boom, that's all we need. They set the barrels near the far wall of the courtyard. When Egan lit the fuse, he didn't run. He watched it burn down like a fuse to his own past. Then a thunderous boom split the air. The fort shuddered. Screams followed. Egan and Marisol ran. Inside the command quarters, chaos reigned. The three men had drawn their guns, shouting orders. Smoke rolled through the doorway. Lark screamed again. Kane turned, just in time to catch Egan's fist. The impact cracked like bone-splitting wood. Kane staggered. Egan didn't wait. He grabbed a fallen sword from the wall and swung hard, disarming the second man. Marisol tackled the third, knife flashing. The fight was brutal, close, fast. Egan and Kane slammed into a support beam, bringing it crashing down. Dust blinded them. A shot rang out, then another. Marisol ducked behind the post, shielding Lark. Her blade found the gut of the gunman trying to reload. He dropped. Kane raised a revolver. Egan stared him down. You kill me, Reyes. Your name. Dies too. Egan didn't blink. Then let it die with a clean conscience. The shot rang. Kane crumpled. Lark sobbed as Marisol undid her chains. You all right? Marisol asked, voice gentle. Lark nodded through tears. He said you'd never come, said you'd forgotten him. Egan knelt beside her. I never forget the ones I fail. That's why I ride. They led her out of the fort as the last of the smoke cleared. Behind them, the walls of Fort Leclerc stood empty again. No more screams. No more ghosts. Just ruin. That night, they made camp far from the fort. Lark slept curled beneath a blanket, her breathing soft. Marisol stared at the stars. Egan joined her. You still heading west? She nodded. I still have something to build. He was quiet. Then, softly, you could build it near where I stop. She turned. And where would that be? Egan looked toward the horizon. Wherever the wild things stop running. Subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's ride. Because sometimes freedom isn't about escape, it's about choosing who rides beside you. San Diablo wasn't marked on any proper map. The sun hadn't yet risen when they arrived. The town crouched at the foot of a black mesa, its streets etched like scars into the dust. Wind carried the scent of smoke and gun oil. A single bell rang from the chapel at the center, each chime slower than the last. Like it was trying to forget the hour, they dismounted near the outskirts. Egan checked the revolver on his hip, then handed a small blade to Lark. Hide it in your boot. Don't draw unless you mean to use it. I do, she said, without blinking. Marisol adjusted her coat to hide the envelope Malric had given her. She could feel the weight of it like a brand against her ribs. Everyone here's bought or afraid, Egan warned. Don't trust smiles. Don't believe quiet. They entered town on foot. The streets were lined with shuttered windows and faces behind curtains. A cantina sat half-collapsed, its door hanging from a single hinge. A trader's stall offered bullets next to bread. From the far end of town, a man stepped out from a saloon. With a slow, practiced swagger, he wore a gray duster. His hair was silver at the temples, and he smiled like someone who'd learned early how to win people with poison. Egan Reyes, he called, his voice smooth. I was told you'd come. Egan stiffened. Diego Salas, you still alive? The man laughed. Surprised? I'm surprised you're still wearing your own face. Diego ignored the jab and turned his gaze to Marisol. And you must be the woman the desert sings about. You've made enemies, Corrida. I admire that. I didn't come for admiration. She said, her voice low. He waved a hand. No, you came for answers and blood. They followed Diego into the saloon. Inside, it smelled of old whiskey and newer lies. A few men watched from shadowed corners. Marisol noticed their hands calloused, twitchy. Not locals, hired. Where's the buyer? Egan asked. Diego poured 3 drinks. Do you know how many men claim to be him? How many towns have whispered his name to explain their own monsters? Enough riddles, Marisol said. We're not tourists. Diego sipped his drink. He was here 3 nights ago. Took a girl from the stables. Didn't pay. Just left a note. Lark swallowed hard. Egan stepped forward. Where'd he go? Diego's smile faltered. South, always south. Toward El Riscate. Marisol blinked. The sanctuary town, Diego chuckled. That's what they call it. But no one's been rescued from there in years. He pulled a folded paper from his coat and slid it across the table. A map. And a warning. Egan didn't reach for it. Why help us? Diego's eyes shifted. Because I owe someone who once saved my neck in Durango. He died with your name in his mouth, Reyes. Said you'd come back for what was lost. Egan picked up the map. Then pray I do. As they turned to leave, Diego grabbed Marisol's wrist. She spun fast, her blade halfway drawn. He held up his hands. Just a final word. El Riscate has rules. Don't enter after sundown. Don't trust children. And if someone offers you water, without asking your name, first don't drink. They left him behind. By noon, they'd left San Diablo's limits. The wind felt colder now, even under the sun. They rode for hours until a ravine forced them to stop. At the edge was an old footbridge, rotting from disuse. Across the ravine, a shape waited, a lone rider, seated, not moving. Egan raised his scope. His breath caught. It's Navarro. Friend? Marisol asked. Used to be. They crossed. On foot, weapons drawn. As they approached, the rider dismounted. He was tall, lean, with a bandolier of knives. Reyes, he said. Didn't expect to see you again. Figured you'd be dead, Egan replied. Navarro's mouth curved. Not yet, but I might be, if I help you. Marisol stepped forward. Then why wait here? Navarro looked at her. Because someone paid me to kill you. And I wanted to see if the price was worth the regret. Lark reached for her boot knife. Egan held up a hand. Who paid you? Navarro looked him in the eye. Diego. Marisol's breath caught. But he lied, Navarro said. He always does. The wind kicked up. Navarro stepped back. They've set an ambush up ahead. 8 riders. Dressed like traitors. If you hadn't come this way, you'd have walked straight into it. Why tell us? Egan asked. Because once, I left you bleeding in a canyon. You survived. That debt's been itching my spine ever since. Marisol nodded. Then we pay Diego back. Navarro turned, mounting again. Ride fast, kill faster. They did. The ambush was swift and savage. Egan's rifle dropped the first 2 before they could draw. Marisol used the ravine's edge to flank the rest, throwing sand in one man's eyes before slicing his throat. Lark covered their retreat with a stolen revolver. It ended in minutes. 8 bodies. No survivors. And in one of their saddlebags a second map. Marked with a red X. Diego sold us out, Egan said, voice tight. Not just you. Lark whispered, holding up a blood-stained letter. He's been tracking girls, hundreds, selling names. Selling stories. Marisol's eyes went cold. Then, he dies screaming. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Tomorrow, betrayal bleeds. And justice comes with a knife. They rode into San Diablo at sunset. The sky burned red behind them, like the desert itself was warning the town. Wind howled between the alleys, kicking up swirls of dust that danced like restless spirits. Doors slammed. Shades were drawn. Mothers pulled children indoors without asking questions. San Diablo knew trouble when it smelled it. And Marisol was riding at the front. She wore her coat open, blade at her hip, face carved from iron. Behind her, Lark clutched the stolen letter. that listed names of girls who had been sold, disappeared, rewritten. And beside them, Egan rode without words, eyes forward, jaw locked. Diego Salas didn't know he was already dead. They dismounted in front of the saloon. The same old piano inside was playing. The same candles burned low, but something was different. The air. Marisol entered first, boots clicking against the warped wood floor. The room turned to watch her. Conversation died. The barkeep ducked behind. The counter. Diego sat in the same corner, sipping from the same glass. His coat was off now. His pistol rested beside his drink. He looked up and smiled. "Well," he said, "didn't expect you back so soon. Thought you'd be halfway to hell by now." Marisol dropped the bloodied letter onto his table. His smile twitched. "Looks like your mail got delayed," she said. Egan walked to the center of the room, planted his boots wide. "You tried to kill us," Diego shrugged. "No, Riaz, I paid someone else to try. That's business." Lark stepped beside Marisol. Her voice cut through the quiet. "Selling children is not business." Diego tilted his head. "Depends who's buying." Marisol's blade cleared her sheath like a hiss. The room held its breath. Then the saloon doors creaked. 4 armed men entered. Diego didn't flinch. Now, let's not rush things. I can offer you a deal." Egan turned slowly. "The last deal you offered bled in the dirt." Marisol stepped forward, blade low. Diego's voice grew cooler. "You walk out now, I let you live. You stay, you die." "Funny," Marisol said. "I was going to offer you the same." Gunfire exploded. Egan moved first. His shot took out the man by the window. Marisol ducked, slashing the leg of another. Before spinning behind the bar, bottles shattered. Bullets slammed into wood. Lark dragged a table for cover, firing twice. One missed. One didn't. The saloon became smoke and fire. Marisol vaulted over the bar, slamming her blade into the ribs of a man with a shotgun. He dropped, choking. Egan disarmed another, smashing his face against a whiskey cask. That left Diego. He stood calmly, revolver in hand, but Marisol saw the twitch in his jaw. The flick of his eyes toward the rear exit. "Running?" she said. He fired. She was faster. Her blade hit his wrist. The gun dropped. He staggered back. "You don't get to disappear," she said. He fell to his knees, holding his bleeding arm. "You have no idea what you're interrupting," he spat. "This trade, it's older than either of you. I'm just one link in a chain." Egan stepped beside her. "Then we start breaking links." Lark raised the stolen letter. "These girls had names, families, futures." Diego smirked, even as blood pooled beneath him. "And you think this stops with me?" Marisol knelt. "No," she whispered, "but it ends with you." Her blade found his throat. Clean. He slumped to the floor, still smiling, but empty. Outside, the town was silent. They burned the saloon. Not in fury. In mourning. As smoke rose, people stepped into the streets. Women, children, men with faces etched in grief. Some carried old rifles. Some carried flowers. They watched the fire. And they watched Marisol. A girl stepped forward, barefoot, maybe 12. She held out a small leather notebook. Inside were names. Names Diego never sent. Names he kept. One page was circled in red. "A rescate," Marisol read. "Under the bishop's watch." Egan nodded. "Then we ride." They mounted again, hooves thundering into the night. Behind them, San Diablo didn't mourn Diego Salas. It mourned what he represented. And it began, quietly, to heal. Subscribe, so you don't miss tomorrow's fire. Because the bishop isn't a priest. He's something far, far worse. By the time the 6th sun rose, the wild had changed. It was no longer the threat behind them, but something inside them. A flicker of defiance hardened into purpose. They rode in silence that morning. The 3 of them, Marisol, Egan, and Lark, The fort was now a ghost in the rear view of memory. What remained was forward, always forward. Lark rode close to Egan, her bruises fading but her eyes sharp. There was steel in her now, tempered by survival. She didn't speak much, but when she did, it carried weight. Marisol watched them both. She had expected jealousy. Instead, she found herself protective of Lark's resilience, of Egan's quiet sadness, of whatever thread had begun weaving them together. By midday, they reached the edges of the Salton Flats' dry, cracked land that shimmered like broken glass under the heat. There was no water, no shade, no mercy, but there was a man. He waited beneath a crooked signpost beside a wagon that looked more myth than machine. It had wheels rimmed in iron, a roof painted with faded suns and moons, and the scent of cardamom. And sulfur clung to it like memory. The man wore a coat stitched with stars and a hat too wide for fashion. His beard was forked, his eyes impossibly blue. Egan slowed. "That's Malric." Marisol narrowed her eyes. "You know him? He trades in what most people pretend doesn't exist, like truth." They dismounted cautiously. The man stepped forward and spread his arms wide. "Egan Reyes," he drawled. "And the storm-voiced girl from Red River's edge. I was beginning to think I'd have to send ravens." Lark tensed. "He's strange. He's worse than that," Egan said, "but he's not our enemy." Malric bowed to Marisol. "Word rides faster than wind, my dear. A woman exiled for refusing to be small. A man who kills his past to protect the future, and a girl rescued from a buyer who deals in names." Marisol frowned. "What do you know about the buyer?" Malric's smile faded. "Enough to make your blood turn to ice." He motioned them to a small canvas tent beside the wagon. Inside, incense burned. Charts were pinned to the canvas walls, maps of places that didn't exist anymore. "The buyer," Malric began, "is not a man. He is a name passed from killer to killer, trafficker to trafficker. He wears different faces, but his trade remains the same, power built on pain." "Where is he now?" Egan asked. "In a place the law doesn't touch, south of the border. In a town where coin outweighs justice and every promise comes with blood." Lark's voice shook. "He won't stop, will he?" "No," Malric said, "not until the legend of Reyes is buried. Or until you bury him." Marisol's eyes burned. "Then we find him." Malric handed her a sealed envelope. "This will get you through the border guards. Don't open it, just show it." Egan looked at the old man. "Why help us?" Malric's gaze turned distant. "Because once, long ago, someone helped me, and I never paid it back." They left the flats behind with the letter tucked beneath. Marisol's coat and a new fire in their chests. That night, they made camp near an abandoned well, just outside the town of San Diablo. Coyotes yipped in the distance. Marisol sat with Lark, brushing out her hair. "You don't have to come," Lark whispered. "You saved me. That's enough." Marisol shook her head. "He won't stop. Not with you, not with me, and not with the next girl." Across the fire, Egan studied the stars, his fingers absently tracing the scars on his palm. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "we go south." Lark turned to him. "What if it's a trap?" He didn't look away from the sky. "Then we spring it our way." The silence after that was soft, almost sacred. In the final hour before sleep, Marisol found herself walking a little away from the fire, into the stillness of the night. She looked up at the moon and whispered, "Abuela, give me strength. I carry your fire. Let it burn clean." Behind her, footsteps. "Egan, I heard you," he said. "Your fire's already burning." She looked at him, unsure of what to say. He offered her a flask. "To the wild, and the ones who dare claim it." They drank. And beneath the stars for a moment. They were not fugitives, not warriors, not exiles, just two hearts, learning how to beat beside each other. Subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's ride. Because the next town whispers one word, betrayal. Elry Skate was nothing like they expected. The map said it was a sanctuary, but the map was a liar. They arrived 2 days after burning San Diablo behind them. The ride south took them through dry gulches, across bone-bleached canyons, and finally, into a basin where the wind forgot how to breathe. Elry Skate sat low and wide, built like a monastery but guarded like a fortress. Stone walls 10 feet high, archways carved with symbols older than the church. And at the center, towering above everything else, rose the bishop's house. It wasn't a chapel. It was a cathedral twisted into something unholy. At the gates, 2 guards watched their approach. Dressed not in uniforms but in linen robes, they held rifles with quiet familiarity. Marisol rode up first, lifting the envelope Malric had given her. One guard examined the seal, then nodded once. The gates creaked open. Inside, it was worse. Too quiet, too clean. The people walked with eyes low and mouths shut. Women in white dresses swept the stones. Children moved in lines, unsmiling, their steps too precise for innocence. Lark leaned closer to Marisol. "This place feels wrong." Egan's jaw clenched. "That's because it is." A man waited for them at the plaza. He was bald, broad-shouldered, his face weathered but unreadable. He wore black robes, hands clasped like a priest. "Welcome," he said. "You must be the ones from San Diablo. Who are you?" Marisol asked. "I am Elias. I speak for the bishop." Egan stepped forward. "Then speak plainly. We're here for the girls." Elias's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We have no girls here. Only followers, seekers," Lark whispered. "That's what Diego said too." Marisol's eyes narrowed. "Where is the bishop?" "He will receive you at dusk. Until then, rest. You've come far." They were led to a guest house clean, sparse, with barred windows and a single locked chest for belongings. A bowl of water waited on the table. Marisol didn't touch it. Neither did Egan. But Lark, trembling, drank. Within minutes her eyes drooped. She collapsed onto the cot. Marisol rushed to her side. "Lark? Lark!" Her pulse was steady, her breath soft. Egan checked the water. "Drugged. Light. Meant to calm, not kill." Marisol stood. "They knew we'd come. They're testing us." A knock at the door. "But Elias again. The bishop will see you." They followed him into the central building. The floor was obsidian, polished to a mirror. The walls bore painted saints, but each had their eyes scratched out. The bishop sat on a throne of carved bone. Literally. Finger bones, arm bones, rib bones, arranged like holy relics around a wooden seat. He wore white, but it was wrong too bright. His beard was gold. His eyes were dead. "Marisol Vega," he said, voice soft. "And the outlaw of ghosts, Egan Reyes." Egan didn't speak. He watched. "You came for girls," the bishop continued. "You think this is a market. But Elry Skate is an idea. A shelter for the broken. A place to shape them into something better." Marisol took a step closer. "You're trafficking." "No," the bishop said calmly. "I am purifying. These children had no future. Now they serve God. And men who pay for miracles." Egan's hand moved toward his coat. The bishop smiled. "If you draw, you both die. My men are behind that door. And your friend sleeps like a lamb in poisoned dreams." Marisol's voice trembled, but not from fear. From fury. "We're not leaving without the girls." "Then you'll join them." They were escorted out. But not to the guest house. To the holding cells. Damp, cold, lined with straw. 2 guards. "One key. As the door slammed, Egan whispered, "We wait. For night. Then we spill blood." Marisol knelt by Lark, who had been dragged there before them. She stroked her hair. "Hold on," she whispered. "The wild is coming, and it burns." Above them, the chapel bell rang. A new sound. the sound of revolution knocking. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Tomorrow they break chains and teach the bishop what true fear feels like. Night fell like a hammer in the cell. Marisol counted the seconds between bells. Every hour, like clockwork, the cathedral rang a soft chime. Not loud enough to wake Lark, but enough to mark the shift change above. 2 guards, 1 torch. A pattern that revealed its cracks if you looked close enough. Egan had already jimmied a sliver of metal from the cot frame. He worked on the lock, hands steady, breath even, outside. The wind carried murmurs, not words, prayers, low, chanting voices drifting from the high stone towers. Marisol's skin prickled. "That's not worship," she whispered. "That's a spell." Egan's mouth tightened. "Then let's break it." The lock clicked. They moved quickly, quietly. Lark was awake now, groggy but aware. She nodded once ready. The corridor beyond was narrow and dark. They moved like shadows, blades drawn, steps memorized. At the end of the hall, a lone guard stood bored, leaning on his spear. Marisol whistled a soft note. He turned. Egan struck, fast, silent. They dragged him into the cell and dressed Lark in his robes. Too big, but it would pass. Marisol donned the robe from a corpse they passed in storage. Alias's guard rotation hadn't planned for ghosts. They crossed the southern courtyard under cover of smoke. Someone had left a brazier burning too long, its coals belching shadows. Inside the chapel, they paused. The children were there, seated in pews. Dozens, their eyes glassy, lips moving in unison. A priestess walked among them, tapping each child with an iron rod. No emotion, no variance, just obedience. Marisol's breath caught. "We can't leave them," she said. Egan nodded. "Then we find the bishop's quarters. And we cut the head off this snake." They moved again, this time toward the central spire. The stairs wound high, past walls etched with scripture and blood. Lark found a passage behind a tapestry, an old maintenance tunnel. It led to a locked door. Inside, they found what passed for the bishop's temple. And the truth. Ledgers, names, ages, transactions, each child marked with a number. Each number linked to a buyer, politicians, clergy, wealthy families from across the territory. And in the corner a girl. She was maybe 10. Eyes bruised, hands bound. Marisol rushed to her. The girl flinched. "I'm here," Marisol whispered. "No one's taken you." Footsteps echoed. The bishop. He entered unarmed. Still, in white, still smiling. "I warned you," he said. "You can't stop an idea." Egan raised his revolver. "No, but we can bury the messenger." The bishop moved fast, faster than they expected. He threw a vial to the ground. Glass shattered. Smoke exploded, choking, blinding. Mariso grabbed the girl and ran. Lark helped her down the stairs while Egan pursued. Shots fired, metal rang. Screams followed. They burst into the chapel again. Marisol shouted, "Now!" Children stood. The priestess raised her rod. Lark tackled her. The rod CLATTRED.MARISOL faced the crowd of children. "You are not broken. You are not forgotten. Follow me." One by one, they did. Dozens of barefoot, wide-eyed children ran through the halls. Behind them, fire spread. Egan had lit the bishop's records. As they reached the gate, Elias appeared. He raised his hand. "Stop! You don't understand what you're doing." Marisol raised her blade. "I do." She struck. Elias fell. They fled into the night, out of the stone gates, into the dust, toward whatever salvation might look like at the edge of a bloody world. Behind them, Elry's gate burned, not just in flame. In truth. And far behind them, somewhere in the wreckage, the bishop crawled from the smoke, gasping, "Subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's vengeance." One last reckoning waits in Red River's edge. Red River's edge stood under a pale morning sky, quiet as sin. Word had traveled ahead of them. The children they'd rescued from Elriskate now rode in wagons and on horseback, scattered among desert wagons, old traders, and a group of traveling sisters who had once been midwives before war drove them into exile. There were over 40 now, more than any of them had ever thought possible. The town's gates had reopened, but not out of grace, not out of fear. Marisol led the convoy. Her hair was tangled by dust and wind, her blade worn at the hilt, her eyes harder than the stone that lined a canyon pass. Behind her rode Egan, shoulders squared, hat pulled low. Lark sat with the children, keeping them calm with soft songs taught to her by the girls in the chapel, songs once whispered in sorrow, now reshaped by defiance. They passed the preacher first. He stood at the gate with his Bible clutched tight, and his eyes full of shame. "Viga," he said, "we heard what you did." Marisol didn't stop. "You saw what I tried to do," she said, "and you said nothing." He lowered his eyes. They entered the square. Mayor Hartwell waited with the council, his vest too crisp, his hands too clean. He smiled the way snakes do before they strike. "Welcome home," he said. "You'll find we're more open to your voice this time." Marisol dismounted. She didn't smile. She pulled the bishop's ledger from her saddlebag and tossed it onto the mayor's polished boots. "These names," she said. "You recognize them?" He stared down. His face blanched. "You should. One belongs to your brother, another to your banker, a third to that priest you funded in Eagle's Bluff." The councilmen looked at each other. Egan tossed the bishop's ceremonial ring beside the book. Its bone-carved cross was still crusted with blood. "This is what we tore down," he said. "What you let fester." Hartwell's smile cracked. "What do you want?" Marisol looked him dead in the eye. "Change," he laughed. "You think you can force reform with stories?" She turned and whistled. The children entered the square, one by one, some limping, some quiet. All changed, and behind them more wagons, more survivors, families who had searched for lost daughters, women once trapped, sisters who could now speak. The town fell silent. And then a voice rose, soft and young. A girl with braids stepped forward and began to sing, not a hymn, funeral song, for the old world. Others joined her. The children, the sisters, even the preacher. Tears ran down hardened cheeks. Hands clasped. Riso stood in the center, her voice steady. "You want to keep your seat, Hartwell? Then sit and listen. This town belongs to the people now. To the ones you tried to ignore." Lark walked to the podium and opened the ledger. Her voice rang clear. "The following names are to be investigated, and if they resist, then we build gallows, not just fences." Applause didn't follow, but something stronger. Did stillness, respect, the kind born of truth no one can deny. That night, Red River's edge held its first honest town hall. The children slept in homes, and Marisol stood at the edge of town again, watching the stars. Egan joined her. "Quiet, we did it," he said. "No," she whispered, "we started it." In the Fadgaza distance, the desert howled, but for once, it sounded like a lullaby. Subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's epilogue, because every revolution deserves its sunrise. The dust of the trail had barely settled when rumors began to follow Marisol Vega, like lost children seeking shelter. From the mines of Silver Gorge to the oasis of Lost Spring, stations and watering holes buzzed with whispers. The wild rider had no master, no chains, and a blade that sang justice. But by the time she reached the plains east of the Black Hills, Marisol had a different mission. Justice, she decided, was not just a measure of retribution, it was the promise of tomorrow. And where tomorrow was threatened, she would carve a path. That first sunrise, she encountered refugees from a failed railway settlement. Company guards had shot the surveyors for trespassing on sacred land. Women wept over empty pantries. Men stared at the horizon, too broken to ride. Emma Rice tossed her bag to Egan, who had tracked her here against orders, and raised her voice. We build anew. We won't let blood dictate our fate. We'll forge rails that honor both progress and the land that gives it life. Egan frowned. You'll need more than words. Marisol met his gaze. I have enough for a revolution. Within days, carpenters who had quit their hometowns returned. Blacksmiths who sold to the richest bidder hammered iron rails beneath her gaze. And to honor the land, they built a council of stewards, miners, farmers, and indigenous elders. When the first locomotive steamed past, whistle cracking the dawn, it wasn't just metal on wood, it was hope on fire. As the train's dust settled, Marisol mounted her horse and rode on toward the next injustice, the next dawn. Legends never rest, they ride. The desert held its breath. Weeks had passed since the fall of El Riscate and the reckoning in Red River's edge. But Marisol Vega didn't rest. She rode alone now. The town stood on its own feet. The children were safe. The council had been purged. Egan remained behind to teach the new marshals. Lark helped the sisters rebuild a sanctuary that would never again wear chains. But Marisol had one last journey. To the place where it all began. The canyon where her brother died. Where the ambush had left her bloodied, hunted, changed. She rode slow, her horse tracing familiar trails beneath sandstone cliffs. The wind remembered her. The rocks whispered her name. At the edge of a dry creek bed, she stopped. There was no cross. No marker, just a flat stone where his body had fallen. She dismounted, knelt, and placed a small bundle wrapped in leather on the ground. Inside, the bishop's ring, Diego's watch, and a piece of ribbon from Lark's braid. His name was Joaquin, she whispered. And he was better than all of you. She stood and poured water from her canteen onto the stone. Not enough to quench. Just enough to remember. Then she turned west, toward the horizon. A town had sent her away. The world had tried to brand her wild, and in their fear, they'd created a fire they could no longer contain. Now, she'd take that fire elsewhere. Marisol returned to Red River's edge. At sunrise weeks later, dusty, thinner, smiling, the town had changed. A woman ran the general store. The church had been repainted, no longer a place of shame but one of reflection. The gallows were gone. In their place stood a library. Lark greeted her with arms flung wide. Egan kissed her forehead. You came back, he said. She nodded. Just passing through. Where to? He asked. She mounted her horse. Wherever they call us wild. That's where I belong, he nodded. You'll be back, she smiled. Maybe, maybe not. And she rode, out past the horizon, where maps ended, where legends begin, where a girl once sold for silence now rode with storms behind her. And wherever Marisol Vega went, justice followed. Not quietly, not politely, but wild. And free. Forever. The end. Thank you for listening to this 12-part journey. Subscribe for more wild legends, fierce women, and justice that refuses to kneel. The horizon beckoned like a promise and a warning. Marisol Vega rode beneath a sky bruised with dawn's first light, the echo of the locomotive's whistle still ringing in her bones. Weeks passed in a blur of motion. She'd only paused long enough to hitch her horse and refill her canteen. Today, she was heading west toward the frontier towns that lay in the jagged shadows of the Sierra Madre. Her guide was a letter from an old acquaintance, Sister Inez, who ran a mission on the border where medicine and mercy were in short supply until now. The mission sat atop a plateau, its white adobe walls glowing in the midday sun. Children played in the courtyard, their laughter fragile against the threat of bandits and drought. Inside, Sister Inez tended to the sick typhoid, cholera, work wounds, armless miracles in a broken world. When Marisol dismounted, the sister ran forward, eyes bright with relief. I knew you'd come. Ines said. Marisol shrugged off her dust-soaked coat. Justice rides with compassion. They spent the day working side by side. Marisol cleaned wounds, tied splints, and fetched water from the lower spring. Egan and Lark organized supplies, blankets, surgical tools, medicine from the rail town. Council. At sunset, they gathered beneath the mission's cross to pray. Inni Acute spoke softly. Not all battles are fought with steel. Marisol felt the truth settle in her chest. Justice, she realized, was as much about saving lives as avenging wrongs. As night fell, word arrived of an approaching gang. Ex-Confederates turned raiders, hunting survivors from the local villages. Their leader, a man called Harlan Crow, had a reputation for cruelty. Marisol stood. Dust clung to her boots. Set the shutters, prepare the sick. Tonight, we ride into the dark. They saddled horses under torchlight. Sisters formed a prayer circle. The townsfolk gathered arms. Children hid behind latillas. When the gang rode up, candles burned through their windows, and the cross's shadow stretched like a sentinel. Harlan Crow spat on the ground. Surrender your supplies. We're hungry. Marisol stepped forward. Hand on her knife. Crow laughed. You think you can stop me? She replied, voice calm. I brought enough justice for both of us. The fight was swift. Sisters dropped jars of holy water. Marisol disarmed Crow with a single move she'd honed. In saloon confrontations, Egan and the villagers drove the raiders back into the night. When dawn broke, the mission stood intact. No lives lost. Inni Acute placed a hand on Marisol's shoulder. You save more than you strike. Marisol nodded. That's the revolution I ride for. She mounted her horse once more. Where now? Lark asked. Madar Ol gazed toward the mountains. Wherever mercy and steel must meet. And with that, Marisol Vega rode on, legend in motion, justice in her wake. Marisol Vega didn't believe in fate, but she believed in echoes, and something in the wind told her the past wasn't done speaking. She followed the trail westward, through burned-out ranch towns and poisoned rivers, to a place called Hollow. Bend a nowhere outpost, rumored to have been cursed since the war. It wasn't the ghosts that drew her. It was the silence. No letters made it in or out. No rail whistles, no trade caravans. Just reports of lights on the ridge and the occasional scream. Marisol entered the town under the cloak of dusk. The saloon was empty, the jail abandoned, the church barred shut, and in the street, a woman stood barefoot in her nightgown, staring at the sky. Marisol dismounted. You all right? The woman didn't blink. He said he'd come again, on the third full moon, when the soil forgets its name. Marisol didn't respond. She just kept her hand near her blade. At the general store, she found a map scrawled with blood and ink. One word written over and over, return. That night, the wind screamed. Wolves howled without pause. The well behind the livery bubbled with black tar. Egan and Lark arrived 2 days later, riding fast and heavy. You found Hollow Bend, Egan said. Or it found me. Marisol replied. They investigated what remained. Scattered journals, torn. Bibles, drawings etched into barn walls. It wasn't a curse. It was something worse. Deliberate control. Psyops. Experimental gas. Government tests long buried. A survivor emerged. An old doctor, hidden in a storm cellar. They called it Project Silence, he whispered. Said they were training the town to be obedient. Broke their minds, one by one. Marisol felt something deep and furious stir in her chest. They turned these people into warnings. Worse, said Lark, into tools. They found the underground chamber beneath the schoolhouse. Inside, devices meant to manipulate dreams, erase memories, implant suggestions. Proof. Before sunrise, they rigged it all with dynamite. As the sun rose, Hollow Bend shook with thunder and flame. Marisol O.L. stood in the ash. "This doesn't end here," she said. Egan nodded. "There's more. They want silence," she whispered. "We'll give them voices." And so she wrote again, this time not toward injustice, but toward its root, toward the architects who thought no one remembered. Marisol. Vega was coming, and she remembered everything. The trail to the architects led into the bones of the Republic. Mir. All Vega rode with fire behind her and secrets ahead. The destruction of Hollow Bend had sent ripples through the underground. Whispers emerged. Hidden names. Retired colonels with new aliases. Doctors scrubbed from public records. Places off maps. She followed the chain to a depot on the edge of Fort Meade, where trains no longer stopped, but soldiers still watched the tracks like they expected ghosts. There, she found her first lead, a manifest with coded cargo, unit. Vessels delivered to something called Facility 9. Egan and Lark tracked the coordinates. It was hidden in a range called the Black Teeth. Facility 9 wasn't a prison. It was a refinery for mines. Underground, windowless, humming with machinery and lies. They breached the outer fence under a thunderstorm. Marisol carried a forged military pass. Egan wore stolen insignia. Lark posed as a nurse. Inside, they found what Project Silence had become. Rows of sedated men and women in beds. Electrodes, looping audio drilled into their ears. Obedient scripts. Names erased. Numbers assigned. One of them was a sheriff from Santa Lucia. Another, a journalist from the Border Tribune. All of them, people who once spoke too loudly. Marisol stormed the main control hall. There she found him, director. Keen. Polished, gray-haired, a war medal pinned above a heart he didn't use. He didn't flinch when she raised her revolver. "You can kill me," he said, "but it won't change a thing. The system is bigger than you." Marisol stared at the rows of monitors behind him, each one showing a different town, a different face, tagged and tracked. "I'm not here to change a thing," she said. "I'm here to end it." She shot the console. Sparks flew. Alarms screamed. Egan threw charges on the server walls. Lark freed the sleepers. Keen tried to run. Marisol tackled him to the ground. She didn't kill him. She dragged him out and chained him to the gates. When dawn broke, the sleepers watched as the facility burned behind them. And Keen watched as every face he tried to erase remembered itself again. They rode out with wagons full of survivors. They rode to newspapers, to judges, to capitals, and everywhere they went, the legend of the Wild Rider grew, not just a blade, not just a ghost, but a reckoning. Marisol. Vega had become the storm the system feared, and she was just getting started. The night after Capitol Bluff burned with truth. Storm clouds gathered over the west like a warning from the earth itself. Marisol. Vega rode at the head of a growing caravan wagons full of families once silenced, banners held high with names written in dust and blood. Behind her trailed not just allies, but the weight of a movement. No longer just whispered stories in saloons. No longer myth. She was the proof, and the system knew it. The final bastion of the old world was a fortress called Dominion Point, built into the cliffs above Ashriver Gorge. It was once a military outpost. Now it was the headquarters of the Western Corporate Authority rail tycoons, land barons, ex-generals who called themselves governors. They had their own army, their own laws, their own gallows, and they'd put a bounty on Marisol's head. But she wasn't coming to hide. She was coming to deliver her own warrant. With Egan and Lark at her side, they crossed the salt flats under moonlight, infiltrated supply routes, bribed disillusioned officers, gathered names, ledgers, blueprints. They prepared not for a duel, but for a siege. Inside Dominion Point, the Council of Lords met in panic. They saw towns rise without permits. Judges rule against their interests. They watched their enemies, once scattered, unite under a single banner. truth, fire, and a woman they couldn't own. They sent riders to negotiate. Marisol sent them back without tongues. Then she gave the order. At dawn, fires bloomed on every ridge around the fortress. Farmers turned fighters took the high ground. Former prisoners cut supply lines. Steam engines, stolen from company yards, barreled down sabotage tracks, carrying makeshift artillery. Egan led the first charge, blowing the south wall open. Lark and the Sisters of El Rescate stormed the communications tower, replacing propaganda with a single transmission. Dominion has fallen. Inside, Marisol fought through marble halls lined with oil paintings of men who never bled. She kicked open the chamber doors. Lord Braith, chair of the authority, stood waiting. His rifle jammed. He tried to run. She shot him through the portrait of himself. By midday, Dominion Point was theirs. Marisol stood on the ramparts as the flags burned. Below, the people flooded in free now to reclaim what was stolen. Egan handed her the Journal of Braith, proof of foreign bribes, child labor camps, assassination orders. Marisol opened it. Read, then cast it to the fire. We don't need their words, she said. We have our own. And from that day forward, the West wrote them in every language of resistance. On barn walls, on bullet casings. And lullabies passed down to children who would never bow. The final reckoning had come, and Marisol Vega had made sure the world would never forget who lit the fire. The dust had barely settled over Dominion Point when the world tried to make sense of the blaze. But Marisol Vega didn't wait for the storytellers. She knew better. History was a weapon, and the ones who claimed to record it often wielded it like a sword, not a mirror. And so she rode not to a battlefield, but to a vault, a place called Del Oro. Hidden beneath the northern mesas. It wasn't on any map. It didn't fly a flag, no citizens, no exports. Just a compound guarded by mercenaries and shadows. Del Oro was where the old world stored its secrets, the ledgers too dangerous to burn, the treaties signed in blood, the blueprints for the systems that broke entire generations. It was where the final string of Project Silence led, where Facility 1 had once been housed, and she was going to burn it to the roots. The ride took 5 days. Egan joined her on the 2nd. Lark on the 3rd, carrying dispatches from every rebelling outpost. The West had risen, just as they hoped, and now the center was exposed. On the 5th night, under a moonless sky, they reached Del Oro's gates. And found them open. No guards, no lights, no resistance. Inside, halls abandoned, files scattered, safes pried open, as if someone had come before them or fled in a hurry. What is this? Egan whispered. Marisol crouched beside a broken lockbox. Inside, she found a cracked mirror. On the back, a single word, carved with a blade. Remember. In the vault room, they found what remained, photographs from Hollow Ben's early days, smiling families, later listed as subjects. Audio reels labeled with the voices of revolutionaries, now dead. A wax cylinder titled simply, Vega. Marisol played it. Her mother's voice filled the chamber. You are not born wild. You are made wild by the ones who feared your softness, by the ones who clipped your voice. Let them hear it now. She dropped the cylinder. Let it shatter. We seal this place, she said. And we let no one rewrite what's been lived. They sealed the vault with the help of miners from Ash River and a group of Apache engineers who had waited generations for their dead to be acknowledged. Then, they collapsed the Mesa. Del Oro vanished beneath its own weight. In its place, they raised a monolith, a smooth stone tower carved with thousands of names, not of the rulers, but the ruled. Not of generals, but of daughters, sons, farmers, singers, scribes. The ones history forgot. Until now. That night, as campfires lit the rim of the canyon, Lark read aloud the names from the stone. Egan played a quiet tune on his harmonica. Marisol sat with her back to the fire, eyes on the stars. The wind whispered through the sage. No longer a threat, but a prayer. She turned to her companions. "It's done," Lark nodded. "For now," Egan smiled. "Then let's ride into the next legend." And, with dawn at their backs, they did. The dust had settled. The smoke had cleared. But the echo of Marisol Vega's name traveled farther than any rider could follow. Months passed. The West reshaped itself, not through conquest, but through cooperation. The rail lines no longer served tycoons alone. They carried doctors, builders, teachers. Schools rose where gallows once stood. Councils were elected where barons used to rule. But people still asked, where was she? Some said she died at Del Oro, buried beneath the stone with the name she fought for. Others swore they saw her on the horizon, just out of reach, watching the sunrise over towns now free. The truth? She was neither ghost nor martyr. She was change. One crisp autumn morning, a young girl in the settlement of New Ashriver found a package on her doorstep. Inside was a worn revolver, wrapped in velvet, and a letter sealed with red wax. She read it aloud to her family. To the one who asks why the world bent, but didn't break. It bent because someone held it when it shook. It didn't break because someone believed it could bend. You are the next someone. Carry forward. V. The girl held the revolver to the light. It had no bullets, only a phrase etched in the steel. Words before war. And so the legend grew. Not in gunfights or last stands, but in songs sung at harvest, in ink scratched on classroom walls, in flags stitched by hands that once trembled but no longer did. Egan taught law in a circuit of towns he helped write. Constitutions for Lark traveled with her mobile library, lending books and memory alike. And in every town, there was always an empty seat at council meetings, not out of absence, but respect. One day, long into the future, when the oldest of the freeborn children asked, "Who's Marisol Vega really?" the answer would come not from stories. But from the land itself, from bridges built over blood-soaked rivers. From courthouses where silence had once ruled, from the hands of a child who carried a steel-etched phrase into the next century. Because legends fade, but what Marisol left behind didn't need her name to stand. It had roots. And roots never burn. The end. Thank you for writing this journey. Subscribe for more stories of resistance, remembrance, and those who never bowed to silence. Marisol Vega felt the earth tremble beneath her boots. The fallout of dominion. Points Fall echoed through every canyon in town. Word spread faster than gunpowder. Freedom wasn't granted. It was seized. But in the stillness after the siege, a new danger emerged. Power vacuums always attract vultures. Egan had gone south to oversee reconstruction of the rail lines, forging a network that would carry people and supplies without tolls or quotas. Lark remained at Ashriver, teaching freed children to read the new history they would write. Marisol rode north alone, toward the Black Mountains, where the old generals had retreated to regroup. The path led through ghost towns once booming, camps now hollowed out by the revolution's tide. In each, Marisol left behind stewards, local leaders elected by popular vote, charged with rebuilding communities on trust, not tyranny. By the time she reached the Black Mountains, she carried a letter sealed with ash, a final convening, 8 generals, 1 treaty, or war to the last sunrise. She gripped the reins and rode into the decommissioned fort at Stormwatch Pass. The walls were lined with banners, white flags hastily hung, mixed with black ones of surrender. Generals in gray coats waited on the ramparts, rifles at port arms but eyes wary. The highest stood on the breach, Brigadier General Lucius Maddox, his uniform torn, medals dulled by dust, but his posture unbroken. "Marisol Vega," he said, "you've broken us. Now what do you ask?" She returned his salute. "Nothing. I propose a ceasefire, a council of equals. You lay down your arms, I lay down my claim. A murmur rose among the ranch, shock, relief, distrust. Maddox nodded. Slowly, words for the history books. But will the people accept it? Marisol smiled, eyes hard as flint. Not my people, ours. They stepped down from their ramparts into the fort's courtyard, joining a line where she met each general colonel. Reyes, whose name she shared but had never met. Captain Serrano, whose troops had saved refugees in the border towns. Major Graves, whose heirloom rifle now lay broken in the dust at her side. She saw not enemies, but survivors of the same storm. She spoke. We've torn down walls built by greed and fear. Now we build bridges of law, of trade, of community. The West deserves its own destiny. Major Graves stepped forward. And the corporate authority? Marisol held up the charred bristles of Braith's journal. Reduced to ashes, their contracts nullified, their lands returned. Colonel Reyes placed a hand on her shoulder. Then let us swear an oath, never to raise a blade against our brothers again. They knelt and joined hands. In that moment, the wind shifted, carrying the chants of thousands down from the valleys below. Cheers, songs, the clatter of hammers and voices rising in unity. The siege that followed was not of cannon fire, but of community soldiers and citizens rebuilding fortifications into schools, barracks into hospitals, watchtowers into lighthouses. As dusk fell, Marisol stood atop the ramparts of Stormwatch Pass, watching the first caravan leave under a banner of green and gold, the colors of renewal and hope. Behind her, the Black Mountains no longer loomed like a wall between worlds. They stood as silent guardians of a new covenant. Agan's voice crackled through a courier's horn from the south. Tracks cleared, lines secure, Lark sends her thanks. She turned and saw Lark's messenger approaching on horseback, a young boy leading a wagon draped in scrolls of fresh maps and treaties. Marisol bowed her head. Then the revolution rides on words as much as deeds. A final flash of lightning split the sky behind the peaks, an omen or a promise. She couldn't tell, but she knew the truth. The West had been remade, and Marisol Vega's journey was far from over. The final chapter awaits. The storm's eye still lies ahead, where the last secrets sleep beneath the sands.